All right.
Yeah.
Oh. Thank you for that. That was for noting, and we follow on. Another little report here. Agenda item 6, the internal audit report 6/21/22, final, dated the 14th of September, which is agenda item 6.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the follow-up report. So I'll summarise for this. So we issued reasonable progress, which is our second highest progress that we can give. So of the 10 actions that we followed up, 60% were fully implemented. 2 remained ongoing, so actions had started but are yet to be finished. And in the final 2 cases, the action had not yet been implemented. Where actions had not been implemented or remained ongoing, we have agreed with management new actions and new deadline dates. I'll pause for question.
Are there any questions from the committee? Councillor Mark Whittington.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. The only questions I've really got on this particular paper are probably really on page 76 around the Section 106 agreements. I think they're actions that have been completed, because I think there's a link between some of those and the next paper that we're going to be considering. So I'm just wondering, Mr. Chairman, if it's possible, if some of the points on there we could consider when we come to look at the next report, because it talks here about, for instance, the first management action, formalising the process for the monitoring of the receipt of Section 106 contributions, and then a full process for outstanding obligations being reviewed. Now, we kind of thought that maybe that should have been in the subsequent paper, which is on the 106 policy. So I'm just wondering if we could come back to some of those when we consider the next paper, if possible. Thank you.
Anybody else have any more comments? I think you have a valid point. And we'll go on to item 7 and come back to that if there's any points relevant, because these are really just for noting anyway. So we'll go on to item 7. I think Nicola McCoy-Brown is going to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chairman. At February's meeting of this committee, it was requested that reports be brought back every 6 months so that members are aware of the funds collected from and the monitoring of Section 106 agreements. You okay? Shall I carry on? Or? No, not at all.
All right, Mark, it's there, is it?
Thank you. The report presented to committee provides an overview of the current situation regarding Section 106 funds. Additionally, as referenced at paragraph 1.10, the Council is required to publish an annual infrastructure funding statement. The first statement was published in December 2020, and officers are currently working on the new statement. Members will note in paragraph 2.2 that there are some figures around the Section 106 funds collected, requested and spent since December 2020. I can confirm that of the £100,000 that is stated to have been requested from developers, there is only approximately £16,000 outstanding. And whilst members are requested to note the report, I'm joined today by our Assistant Director of Planning, and we would very, very much, as two new members of the team, like to hear what else it is that members would actually like to be included in the report, because we recognise that this is a very high level report that has been produced for this committee. Thank you.
Emma Whittaker, did you want to come in now or answer the questions when they put?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to answer questions as and when they're put to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Whittaker.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I have got a number of questions, and also potentially refers back to some of those sort of processes from the previous thing. I appreciate the comments that Nicola said, with both her and Emma being fairly new in post, kind of trying to get a feel for what members would want. And I appreciate as well some of the numbers that are here as well. But I've got a number of things that I would like to see in them. So if I can just go through them, just note them. It's not really a question, but things I'd like to see. The first one is, and I think he refers back to the point on the audit where it says we will formalise the process for monitoring the receipt of contributions received and spending. I think, from my perspective, I think what I'd kind of like to see is indication of the total amount of Section 106 contributions requested from developers, how much has been paid over, so how much is outstanding, and then potentially, because I know some of these 106 contributions are time limited, how much have we kind of had to then give back to the developers because we've become time expired on them? Because I think that'll be really useful, because I appreciate it then goes on, because one of these other points here talks about a set up a formal process to develop where outstanding planning obligations are regularly reviewed and followed up. And I think as part of that process, we should be teasing out, how much has been collected, how much is still to be collected, has it been applied, where has it been applied, and where are we running up against the expiry date? Because there's then a big risk that we managed to give the developers in the first place to agree to pay a contribution, and then for whatever reason we're not taking it off them, and they then walk away and go, fine, you're now expired. So potentially there's an impact then on potentially on funding schemes that we've agreed to. So I think that's probably most of the points that I've jotted down here. I think this information is kind of, it's good to have a report, so it flags it up. But I seriously think we do need a lot more information along those sorts of guidance. So potentially, Mr. Chairman, could I propose that, obviously this depends on the officers, a second recommendation that they potentially bring another report back in a period of time that addresses some of those questions, if the officers are okay with that, and give an indication of time for that? Would that be appropriate?
This report should be given to planning. The report that you're asking for, and I mean, we have only brought this up now because it was part of the internal audit, internal recommendation. So, I mean, I would have thought that this was sufficient, and that we advise planning to follow it through, because this is going to go to planning, and that they should have regular updates on the Section 106 funds. Does that not make sense? Emma Whittaker.
Thank you. If I perhaps can assist, I think you're absolutely right, Chairman. There does need to be regular reporting to the Planning Committee, because obviously the Planning Committee is the responsible or one of the decision makers when it comes to these planning applications. I think what Councillor Whittington has said this afternoon actually makes a lot of sense, because it's almost like a follow-on as well from the audit report. In terms of the background, there obviously the auditors are content we've passed, but I suspect what this committee is perhaps wanting a bit more information is how we've passed, what processes we've got in place to ensure that we're properly collecting any contributions, and also let's not forget it's not just about financial contributions. Sometimes it's a physical delivery of things like affordable housing, or getting the developer to do things such as the installation of play parks and other such things. So I think there might be some merit actually in bringing a paper back, picking up on some of those points if the committee would like that. What I would suggest in terms of timescales is we're currently working on an update to the infrastructure funding statement, which we have to produce annually. The next date for publication is December. That probably actually has some of the information in it already that you would like. So perhaps I can go away and have a think about it and put something on the forward programme if the committee would like an update. Maybe December, maybe January, just to take into account the timescale for when we've got to do that national sort of update, if that would suit. Thank you.
Want to come back, Mark?
Yeah. Sorry. Sorry, Mr. Chair, excuse me. Don't worry, it's not COVID, I hope it's okay. Yeah, I take your point about potentially Section 106 monies, and the way the policy has been implemented should be a planning committee issue, and I think it should be regularly reported there. But also, I think Emma has also got a point about it being this was an issue specifically raised by the auditors. So maybe if we could have an update report in a few months, and then going forward, if the planning committee could then receive the regular updates, I think then hopefully that would have squared everything off, because the auditor, we've satisfied ourselves that the audit issue has been resolved, and now the planning committee are now receiving the information to enable them to monitor it as part of their role, if that makes sense.
Thank you for that. Yes, you can add that on to the recommendation then that you wanted to. Sue Woolley.
Thank you, Chairman. Completely agree with you as far as our job is process, more so, and that it should go to planning committee. I suppose what's making me wobble a bit, and that I want to assure myself is that our process is tight and it's right. And I'll bore you anecdotally. You will see that last bullet point around the Bourne 45,000. Now, I do happen to know that if one of the Bourne councillors had not hounded the life out of me, quite rightly, for me in turn to hound the life out of the NHS representatives that we've got, that money would have been lost. And so it's a case of we need to have assurance that we've got something in place that is actually checking on it. I think off the top of my head, that amount, I think it's getting on for 2 years old. We're down to days now, if not even hours, that funding would have gone. And part of the problem is it's our NHS colleagues. They're very stretched in that arena. I think there's one person for the whole of the East Midlands. So we really need to be mindful of that, so that we are helping them, pointing that out. Now, where that lies and where it sits, I'm in your hands, but I think we do need a mechanism to make sure that we are getting every bit that we should be getting.
Yeah, thank you. Gloria.
Thank you. This might not be for this committee, but 106 money is very important to all the areas within the district. And I don't think we get, as councils, get very much input into what's available. I would like to ask, if possible, from the ladies here, if they can liaise with the councils and give us an update on a regular basis of what's available and where the funds have gone. Because the last lot, we had a lot of money and they did come to us eventually. And like Sue said, there was very time limited on it to spend a lot of money. And I think if we had more of an update and more notice, then we could utilise the funds in the right and correct ways.
A valid point, no doubt. Paul. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I have some concerns. I think we need to monitor 106 money quite closely. For instance, I know it comes under planning committee, but we need assurance that we've got the processes in place. And Councillor Woolley mentioned about we want to make sure where the money goes. Obviously, planning decide the 106 with the planning applications. That's great. It goes into a pot. But I have instances where that money has not been distributed out unless you chase it up. I mean, a couple of years ago, I think on an education thing, the money went to the county council. So Woolley might not like me for saying this, but it went to the county council and I had to chase it up so the school actually got the money. I think it was paid to the county council and didn't come back. So there are instances. So I think we need to make sure that when the money goes into these pots, is there a process whereas does SKDC chase it up to make sure the recipients actually get the money? Because it seems to me, unless it's changed recently, it is up to us as ward councillors or what to chase it up to make sure that the money is actually delivered. On a personal thing, I don't know whether Rosie can help me, not maybe for this committee, could I have a copy of, it says there is a schedule of the funds held. I would actually like, I don't think it's confidential or anything, could I personally, and maybe other members of the committee would like it, a copy of the schedule of the 106 funds so we can actually look down it and see if there's anything in our particular area wards that wants to be paid. Yeah, but I think we need a procedure to make sure the money isn't just put into SKDC's pot or paid to the county council or the NHS and then it's just lost and the rightful recipients don't get it. So, thank you. I think Rose wants to reply.
Never used one of these before, sorry. I think if you read last year's infrastructure's funding statement, which is on the website, that answers an awful lot of your questions. It details in granular information what we hold and where it's to be spent and what application and development it came from. And it ties it down to pence. So if you do want to have that information up until last December, it's out there. So we haven't kept it in the dark or anything. We're under an obligation to publish it, and so it is available. And yes, if you want to, I keep spreadsheets myself of income and outcome, and I can share those with you if you wish. Yeah, but I do have to stress that those do and have an awful lot of things not for sharing on because they're my personal spreadsheets and I do calculations on them and stuff. So. And the situation from the writing of the the IFS last year and last week, I've got us a little presentation to just detail that as well. So I can tell you up till last Friday exactly where we are, if you wish me to. Oh.
Emma, you wanted to come back on.
Thank you. Hopefully that's giving a little bit of reassurance that actually we do know where we are. But I absolutely get the point that we need to make sure, and you need to make sure as a committee that you know that we know what we're doing. Can I make a bit of a suggestion? We're in the process, obviously, of updating everything for this infrastructure funding statement. We will make sure that we disseminate that information amongst not just this committee, but councillors. And then we'll look as well at how we can regularly feed that information back so that you as your ward councillors know where you are, but also the various stakeholders within the community also know what funding pots we've got that could be available for them. I'm also very keen to make sure they know how to ask for that money, so they give us the right information so that we can release that to them as and when it's appropriate. So hopefully that would tip the will satisfy you today.
Yes, Paul.
Could I ask you then, Emma, do recipients actually have to ask for the money to chase it up, or do you actually contact them directly?
So we can look at getting the information out there, particularly to towns and parish councils, for example, also internally. And I know that we do, and we've got a corporate working group set up already. So we can share that information. So housing, for example, I know there's an affordable housing sum of money that's waiting to be spent. So we have made our colleagues aware of that, and we can work more closely with them. We do have to be very careful, because we have to have checks and balances in place to make sure that if somebody requests the money, that it's done formally, it's done properly, it's with the right information, so that we can satisfy ourselves as the planning authority that the money is being spent appropriately. Because the worst case scenario would be if we hand money over, the developer challenges, we can't properly audit that. We as a council would have to refund that money, because we're ultimately responsible. So we've got to have those steps in place. But there is some training, some guidance needed, I think, so people understand what information we need to audit where we're sending the money.
Ashley, I think you want to speak.
Yes, I did. Thank you, Chair. First of all, yes, I do think that the 106 monies need to be reviewed in more detail, and there should be more scrutiny of them. But I don't agree that it's the planning committee that should be doing it, partly because we already know several meetings about how the planning committee has meetings that are too long anyway, and I don't know where it would fit in that agenda. And besides that, it's unconstitutional. Schedule 9 of our constitution outlines what the purpose of the planning committee is, and it's to carry out, as I'm sure you know, Chair, it's to carry out the council's functions relating to the Schedule 1 of the local authorities, brackets, functions and responsibilities, brackets, England Regulations 2000. So anyway, it's not there. I think it should be the Rural and Communities Committee, because it is effectively about communities. We've said that we are holding more than £300,000. It's almost £500,000 we're holding. Yeah, I think if you add up the money that SKD is to spend on community projects and the money that we are supposed to be distributing to local bodies in paragraph 2.2, we've got £500,000 in the bank waiting to be spent. I'd love to know where that is supposed to be going, and I will be contacting Rosie Townend after the meeting about particular items where residents have asked me what happened to the 106 on that particular issue, on that particular planning application, and I apologise to the residents for not having done that already. The other solution to it is for someone in Ken Lyon's performance management team to keep this regularly updated. So in the same way that we're supposed to be monitoring recycling figures and fly tipping and projects completed and so on, we could say 106, where are we and how long is it taking us to spend the money? And the obvious question to this, and I don't know if it's a question for this committee, is why have we got £500,000 that is unspent? Yeah, why have we got £500,000 that's unspent? Thank you.
It may not be due to be paid out yet. That's one answer. Mark. Oh, Sue. Oh, gosh. Oh.
Thank you for pointing us to that infrastructure document. It is exceedingly helpful. However, it's a moment in time, as it were, in that it's sorry, let me get back to the beginning. So that's for 1920, the one that's on the website at the moment. Or is 20, are you saying 2021 is also there?
This was the first document like this that we ever wrote. So it's a summary really of where we stood this time, December last year. It's the historical record of everything that the council owns at the moment with 106 monies. So it isn't just the movement in 1 year. It summarises the whole of the section 106 contributions we've got.
I suppose what I'm getting at, Chairman, is the fact that yes, we have this document, but where is the up to date? You know, the rolling and accessibility to the rolling amount. Yeah, but yeah, maybe so. But this is quite out of date now, and this is a financial year ago. We should have the 2021 one by now anyway, but also it's just that, and I think it's the point that you made. So if we could have it so that it's in a format for both councillors and indeed areas as well, that would be really good.
So
we'll work something up. We'll perhaps share it for informal comments just to make sure that it's in a format which is most appropriate and for ease of reference. The requirement is a mandatory requirement that the government sets us now to publish this annually, which is why there hasn't yet been an update. We're working on the next update, but we have the figures live for our use. So there's no reason why we shouldn't find a way of reporting interim updates for councillors.
Mark Whittington.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'll thank Councillor Baxter. As Chairman of the Constitution Committee, I should have known those unconstitutional. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. I think the best thing to do potentially as part of the Constitution review, maybe is if we look at section 106 monies, as you said, Councillor Baxter, to work out the best committee for them to actually go in. And it may be that the actual report goes to rural and overviews in terms of the performance monitoring. But in terms of the actual monitoring the process, that might be a thing for this committee to look at the process. So maybe perhaps that'd be something we can maybe think about at our next Constitution Committee meeting on the 11th of November. If I forget to raise it, I'm sure you'll raise it. Alan's here as well, and I'm sure we can then work out potentially the best place for it under the new Constitution. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
To speak, we're Councillor Baxter says it's communications and rural. Yeah, I think he's right, which is and really we ought to conclude now and say that we'll note this report and we will receive updates and it will go to the appropriate committee. Is there anybody? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chairman. As far as I understand from our last Office of Member Housing Development Group, there is an amount of money of about 550,000, which is currently labelled to a scheme on Elizabeth Road in Stamford, and that application is progressing. We have had one previous occasion with 106 monies in Stamford, which we had to very quickly use last year round. And there was a report that came on 106 monies to the Planning Committee last December, but it doesn't seem to have followed through. So those quarterly updates that are supposed to be happening, I'm sure, as Emma's already nodding, will continue again. So they seem to stop, but they're going again. But the amount of money, I think that maybe Councillor Ashley Baxter is referring to, is currently labelled for that. And we are awaiting clarification on that from the Finance Department. Thank you.
Thank you. So have we all concluded on that? We're all happy with the recommendation. Thank you. Let's move. Agenda item 8, which is the audit findings for South Kesteven District Council. We seem to have kept Mr. Cuttle waiting an awfully long while this afternoon. You were well down on the agenda, so to speak. You'd like to introduce your report now?
Thank you, Chair. So I'll take the report as read, but there was just a few things I wanted to draw out and bring to the committee's attention. So the first thing to do really is just to remind everyone of our responsibilities and the work that we're undertaking in the year. So there's two things. There's the audit of the financial statements. So giving an opinion on whether the financial statements give a true and fair view, and also whether or not it's in accordance with the code of audit practice. And then the second piece of work that we do is around commentary on value for money arrangements. So in previous years, you would have received this audit findings report, and it would cover both the financial statements audit and the value for money conclusion. And the audit opinion that you get that goes alongside your financial statements that you publish on your accounts would cover both those areas, so the financial statements and the value for money. From April 20, and we did explain this in the audit plan that went to the last meeting, value for money audit has been decoupled from the audit, the financial statements audit opinion, and there is a separate output report on that. We do make reference in our financial statements opinion to value for money, particularly if there was anything that was really significant from that work that might impact our financial statements opinion, but that is a key difference. So this report and the purposes of it is to communicate our findings specifically in relation to the financial statements audit. So that's what I'll move on to. So in terms of the audit, we're now complete, subject to receiving a final set of signed accounts and the management representation letter, and our anticipated audit opinion will be unmodified. So in terms of the findings, they are summarised in the report. There's in section 2, the financial statements section, which covers the significant audit risks. So they're the areas that we focus most of our work in the year, and that's either because of the requirements of auditing standards. So we're required on every audit, regardless of whether it's public sector or commercial, to have a significant risk around management override of controls and revenue recognition, through to the areas that we would consider either there's a complexity to them, they're high in value, there's a level of estimation, that type of thing, which in relation to your audit is around the valuation of the pension fund's net liability and the valuation of your land and buildings. So in terms of the substantive findings, that it's probably helpful to draw to your attention because they're reported in the reports. There were two material amendments to the financial statements. The first one relates to the valuation of the pension fund, and this was something that was out of management's control. So as you're aware, you're a member of the county pension scheme, and they updated, following the audit, they updated the... Well, I've tried to not, given the issues that we had on page numbers, I can tell you what it is on our report. So page 8 of our report. So I mean, I'm using the numbers from the website. I don't have your pack, but if you look at the number in the bottom right hand corner, page 8. So that explains the work that we've done around the valuation of the pension fund liability. And it explains at the bottom that there was a change to the assets and liabilities of the pension fund, and the share relating to the council means that you were required to update your financial statements. And because that amount was material to the audit, 2.3 million, you made a change to the accounts at quite a late stage. But as I said, that was completely out of your control and not unexpected. The second area of amendments, so this relates to the accounting for around revaluations and depreciation on revalued assets. So there was an amendment, material amendment agreed to the accounts as well, and retrospectively to the 1920 comparators, just to explain that that's something that has no bottom line impact. So it was just a movement between reserves, but nevertheless, as it was material, it was agreed that it would be needed to be updated. In terms of the values of those amendments, they are explained in a little bit more detail in Appendix A of the report, which is page 22 of our report, I think perhaps page 88 of your pack, hopefully, and that sets out the adjustments. So we are in a position to sign, as I said, once we receive those documents, and I'd happy to open up to questions, but probably just to also say thank you to the finance team for their cooperation on the audit, and I'll be looking to sign next week and close this down. Thank you.
Thank you for that explanation. And I'd like to, I'm amazed that we've got them out so quick, to be quite honest, because there's lots of local authorities around the country that haven't even had last year's, let alone this year's. So we're doing quite well to have them in October, although it would have been nice to have met the target, but that's down to outside people wanting further information and not telling you till the last minute, the PSAA. Mark Whittington.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think that's the point I want to pick up on, because obviously I'm aware that a lot of these changes have kind of come out of the fact that the actual audit code has changed, and there's a lot more now emphasis upon auditors to sort of check assumptions around the valuation of assets and around any estimates that are in the accounts. And so just a general question to the auditors, bearing in mind that sort of and I know a lot of this has been in response to some criticisms that the Financial Reporting Council made of audit firms, both in the public and the private sector. But I'm just wondering, in terms of with all of the increasing checks that are now required, do the auditors think that the sort of the reporting timetable that local authorities now have going forward is a feasible one, given in mind all the increasing amount of checks that have to take place? That's just a general question going forward for the future. In terms of this particular report, I took read through. It's a very, very good report and very, very detailed, and I find it fascinating. I've got a question, and the question is on page. It will be your page 22 with little purple numbers, and our page 88, where we've got the audit adjustments. And I looked through them, and for the top two, there's one debit and one credit. For the bottom one, there's one debit and one credit. And then for the pension liability, there appears to be two debits and one credit. Now, it's a long time since I did basic bookkeeping upon my SEMA many, many years ago. But I'm just a bit, can you just let me explain to me why there's two debits listed there and only one credit? That's just a really sort of, probably just a real accountant's question. If that could be answered, I think that'd be quite useful, because I couldn't quite understand that. Not unless you're saying that you're debiting long-term liabilities and the pension reserve is part of the long-term liabilities, in which case you should only really have it once, but I don't know why it's there twice. That would be my question. I think that's it, other than to say it's a really, really comprehensive report, and as an accountant, I love reading it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mark. Well, of course, two debits and one credit leaves a credit in the end column, if you look. Yeah, I know. I'm going back to dear old Frank Wood, book one. There should only be one debit and one credit. So I've got a few issues.
Yeah, so I mean, you're right, there's a debit and credit, and it washes through the reserve as well. The nature of local government accounting and the fact that you can't have any impact on bottom line means that things have gone through. But I mean, that's a fair observation. Essentially, there's more underlying adjustments on that, but essentially it's just reducing the balance sheet, the liability. So, I mean, I'm happy to issue to make it clearer, but there's a debit and credit, and they net off against each other. On the very first question about the timetable, well, I don't think there's been a clarification on what the new timescale is next year. So I don't know. Last year, the deadline was November. Don't really think that much changed between then and this year for a September deadline to be brought in. There's still some of the impact on the accounting in terms of how the council prepares their accounts and the complexities around some of the COVID grants and things like that, to the nature of people working remotely as well. So I think I'm quite pleased to be able to clear this audit. As you said, it would have been nice to have done it in September. There is no impact on you in terms of not meeting that deadline. I think you're right. I think 9% of audits were signed by the 30th of September for varying reasons. I think Grant Thornton's figure was 13%. So, I mean, nothing to crow about certainly, but it brings the average up very slightly. But quite a few have been signed subsequent to that in October and November. So I suspect that by the time we get to November and last year's 59%, I imagine will be quite close to achievement. So whether or not that is a reasonable timescale, it's probably not for me to answer. The later you have it, obviously, then it's kind of nature to then work to that deadline. So last year we probably only signed things in the last couple of weeks of October. So I think there's a bit of a balancing act, but there's some quite clear underlying issues that need to be resolved, because it's quite clear that the current achievement of the deadline is not really acceptable, and there's a lot of reasons for that.
Yes, but the deadline was supposed to be July, wasn't it? And it was extended last year to September. But whether it'll ever get back to July again, I doubt very much. Is there any other question? Ashley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not an accountant, and I find the layout of this particular, these items I find really unhelpful and confusing, really. It would be useful. Most of it appears to be the things that you have to say because you are the external auditor, and that's what you have to do. It would be great if there was a way of drawing our attention to the exciting bit, really, to skip into the interesting bit, such as it is. I guess it's not your fault, that's prescribed in law, but a lot of it is buried in the appendices as to the bits that we should be reading and we should be concerned about. Having said that, I'd like to know, either from the Director of Finance or from the external auditor, how would I, as a member of the council, get a copy of the audited, the detailed accounts, the equivalent detailed accounts for the council's wholly owned companies? That's public money, which is paid for entirely by SKDC, which is handed over to Invest SK, Environment SK, Leisure SK, and all the other SKs. I would like to see how they are spending my money and residents' money, and it's complete brick wall. How do I do that, and why aren't they included within these accounts here? And finally, I'd like to draw members' attention to page 144 or page 18, whichever way you read it, the termination benefits. The page which irks me most every time. I think this is the 6th year in a row where we have paid more than £300,000 to ask staff to leave. £300,000 a year. If we'd spent anything like that on our leisure centres, and Deep Leisure Centre in Yeah, yes, it is. It's on page 144, Chair. If we'd spent that amount of money on the Deepings Leisure Centre or any of the other leisure centres, we wouldn't be in the shambolic situation we are in at the moment.
144 is the next item on the agenda. You obviously haven't read it properly.
It is Ashley.
Right, so there no further comments on this. I'll ask the committee to approve the signing of the management letter of representation at the end of the meeting. Are you signing it, Richard, as well? Or is it just me? Yes.
Well, what subjects the committee approving?
Yeah, well, yes. Can I have the committee's approval then? Thank you for that. So we'll now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is agenda item 9, the statement of accounts. Well, you can ask your question later. Richard, I believe you're dealing with this. No, aren't you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this report follows the governance report that External Audit have presented. I personally think this is a cause for celebration that this committee has got audited accounts in front of it. As already been said, over 90% of councils have not got to this position or are only just getting to this position. So it's testament to finance colleagues and external audit that we've got to this position. This is the culmination of over 10 months worth of work to get to it, at a time of which we've dealt with pandemic, grants, test and trace payments, working remotely, focusing on medium-term financial plan, budget setting for next year. So it's fair to say this has been a fairly stressful period, but we've got to this position. So hopefully the committee will recognise that and give its thanks to finance colleagues to getting us to this position. As already been said, there have been a number of changes which the external auditor has gone through. In the main, these are the same set of accounts that you had at your 21st of July meeting, which were within the published deadlines. So they were on our website by the 31st of July, and these will be on our website once the opinion has been confirmed. There have been some adjustments. I won't go through those all again because they've already been referenced. But in terms of companies, the only requirement for the council was to incorporate Gravitas Housing within the group accounts of the council's accounts. These are the council's accounts, not anything to do with the companies. They've got their own set of accounts. But there was a need this year because of the materiality threshold for Gravitas to be incorporated. The expectation is Leisure SK will be incorporated into the council's accounts next year when it's had a full trading year. But for the 2021 accounts, Gravitas has been incorporated, and they also had to be audited externally as well. And as if you saw in the previous agenda item, Gravitas received an unqualified audit opinion on its accounts as well, and all those will be published at Companies House. That's where all the accounts will be found in accordance with companies law. So everything is compliant. There was on table 1 of the, I won't go through all the details, but table 1 in that agenda item details the changes that have been made to various notes and various statements, but the majority of the pack remains the same as it was when we talked about this, the draft set of accounts back in July. And finally, the annual governance statement, which the committee was cited on back in July, and there was some feedback given at that meeting. Those changes have also been incorporated into the final version that's here today. So what we have before is a total audited set of accounts that hopefully we'll be able to approve this afternoon and sign the appropriate documentation. Thank you.
I thought you would, Ashley.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I'm surprised I was first, but yeah, I guess if you ask a question before the item, you get up the queue. So what I wanted to ask was the termination benefits I wanted to make the point that this is the 6th year in a row where we've spent more than £300,000 on asking staff to leave. That money could have been better spent on various other items, including the Deepings Leisure Centre. But the more direct question for this meeting is, Invest SK, how do I get to their detailed accounts? I would like to know how my money is being spent and it is impenetrable. Surely there is a way for me as a member of the council to find out how the council's money is being spent.
Richard, would you like to answer that?
I can. I would probably suggest it's more of a companies committee question than it is a governance and audit committee. Invest SK is not within the remit of these accounts. As I said in my presentation, these are the council's accounts, nothing to do with the companies. The companies have their own accounting requirements and they comply with companies law accordingly. Of course, if you go into Companies House, you'll find accounts that may be abbreviated. I don't know, I've not looked myself, but Invest SK's accounts will be on there. But I would suggest it's a question that goes to the companies committee, not this committee.
Chair, I've asked at Companies Committee and met the same brick wall. I've tried a freedom of information request and met the same brick wall. The Invest SK, I suspected when it was set up that it was a deliberate attempt to prevent people finding out what the council was spending our money on, and everything that's happened since has proven that to be correct. I don't understand why. I've been onto the Companies House website. They are summary accounts. They are impenetrable. I don't understand why either on pink paper or undercover or whatever, I can't be told answers to ordinary questions that I'm asking about the way this council is spending money. And I am tickled by Councillor Stokes Junior's new job title, Cabinet Member for Finance and Waste. Thank you, Chair.
Mark Whittington.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm kind of following up on Councillor Baxter's point on page 125, when we sort of had the explanation of the statement of group accounts, and it says yes, however, the transactions relating to Environment SK and Invest SK are not material as they receive the majority of their funding from the council. I just want a bit more explanation around that, because I'm struggling a little bit as to certainly why Environment SK, which has been trading for several years, isn't in the group accounts. And why is the fact that they receive the majority of their funding from the council material in that? That'd be really quite useful, I think, to understand. I think I do share Councillor Baxter's concern as well, because I've gone to Companies House website and I've looked at the accounts on there, and of course they're complying with companies law, because they're classed as small companies. Legally, they're only required to do abbreviated accounts, which is basically just a balance sheet and some notes. So it gives no indication of an I&E. You can kind of look at if they're profitable or not by looking at the P&L reserve on the balance sheet. The movement year to year will be the loss or profit from the previous year brought forward. So that's the only way you've actually got of knowing if they've made a profit or a loss since the previous year. So that's useful, Councillor Baxter. That's a line to check. But yeah, it's just a little bit more clarity, certainly around why, because they receive the funding, majority of their funding from us, why that then excludes them from being as a separate. I'm just trying to understand, Richard, the technicalities of this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Would you like to come back on that, Richard?
Repeating myself, Mr. Chairman, because the intercompany trading between the council and the companies themselves do not reach the materiality threshold. That's been set by external audit. So anything above that watermark needs to be incorporated into group accounts. Anything below that watermark doesn't need to be. And the materiality threshold, because of the asset base of Gravitas, takes it above that threshold, hence why they're included. Those that fall below, there's no requirement on the council to include them in group accounts. As I said, Leisure SK will fall into that because the trading activity is of the volume that would take it into the group account territory. But I would keep saying it's a companies committee question that's being asked. It's not within the remit of governance and audit to want to look at the accounts of the companies. That's not within their terms of reference. That sits with the companies committee, not with this committee. Hopefully the focus this afternoon is on the council's accounts, not the company's accounts. That's a different matter.
just that technical point, which I think, Richard, as soon as you said auditors materiality, that's really what I was looking for. The actual reason, justification why, which I think you can explain.
Paul,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to follow up on what Councillor Baxter said about termination benefits, to be quite honest. This is the thing that's concerned me for a while. I know they're listed on page 144, paragraph 14, termination benefits. And yeah, well, I suppose the good news is they're down from 390,000 last year to 307,000. And I've got a pretty good idea about how they're calculated, but it all seems a little bit of a mystery. I don't know whether Alan or Richard could enlighten us as to, is there any policies that they have to follow to be calculated, or what's the procedure to actually arrive at those figures? So the question really for Alan or Richard. I think it's probably Alan really.
Well, I can put my 2 pence in. This is the culmination of the restructure that council approved when Karen Bradford, as the new chief executive, presented a new management structure. Within that report was very detailed costings of the implication of implementing that structure, which obviously meant there would need to be some changes, and that this is part of the outcome from those changes. So the question about, if you like, the approval and the validation goes back to that restructure report, which I think was October 2020 from memory. So that's how it's done. Every payment that's made goes through a very robust business case process that ultimately signed off by all the statutory officers to evidence value for money and ensure that due HR and legislative requirements have been met. But the lion's share of the payments that have been referenced are part of that restructure that was approved by council last year. I don't know if Alan's got anything to add.
Thank you, Chairman. So through you, yeah, I mean, some of those things will be calculated using the redundancy scheme and policy here, which is set as a redundancy policy. So most of those cases that Richard spoke about will fall under that criteria, which is set in advance. So yeah, that's how that works, and they'll follow through. And sometimes if you're in a time of change, trying to reduce costs, it's just one of those things that you have to go through to get to that point. So yeah, it is always disappointing when we see that, because the cost of that is cost we should be, we could be, spending elsewhere, but it does help us get the bottom line down over time, doesn't it?
Just make that point that, of course, what you're seeing on this side of it, because these are statutory requirements in terms of the publications, you're seeing the payments that are being made, but of course what you're not seeing is the longer term benefits. If you recall back to the report that I've referenced, you'll see there was almost an investor saving, a payback. The structure proposals that Karen Bradford brought forward showed a payback over time following the initial payments that would need to be made to implement the structure changes.
Right. If I could just follow that up, I understand the reasoning behind it. Thank you, Richard and Alan, for explaining that. What I would like some assurance of, though, is who actually signs these payments off. And I don't think it could be the chief exec, because one of them on previous year related to a payment to the chief exec. So it can't be. Is it a cabinet member? You mentioned statutory officers. So really, who signs it off? And what assurance could we have that if somebody wanted to say, make a payment of £1 million or £500,000 to somebody, that would not go through, that somebody would actually stop a large payment like that?
So it's really clear, Paul. It's really clear that that's the 3 statutory officers. So you're right. As long as, I guess, might be an issue if 3 statutory officers were all involved in this all at the same time. But yeah, so it'd be the 3 statutory officers, monitoring officer, Richard is section 151, and the head of paid service, normally a role that's associated with the chief executive of a council, but not always. We have to sign to say that's provided value for money. As you can see, it's part of the audited account, so it's picked up there as well. and in terms of, it's not a free for all, if you like. There is a process to ensure that it does provide value for money for the organisation, and a reporting process for that.
Does it not go to the, does it go to the cabinet in any way, for their approval or not? No. Okay, thank you.
Is everybody happy with the accounts then? And no further comments? It is recommended that the Governance and Audit Committee approve the 2021 Statement of Accounts, note the outcome of the audit work, and we've already approved that the letter of representation be signed by the management. No, that's a different one, isn't it, Richard? Thank you, Paul, for seconding. All those in favour? Any against? Abstention?
Okay. Is the governance statement a separate item? With respect, Chair, I tried to ask a question about it in July and I was told that I'd gone over the line or whatever. So I'll abstain on the whole item. I don't want to drag it all back in again, but yeah, I think some of my frustration or some of my confusion is down to the different packs and statements that are sent at different times. So apologies that I haven't asked for a question about the annual governance statement at the right time, but I abstain on this item. Thank you.
That will be noted. Last item on the agenda is the work plan, which I hope you've received. I believe that it's in order, apart from the one for March, where I think that the draft internal plan for the internal audit should read 22-23, because it will come next March and we should be discussing the year ahead. Apart from that, I think we're all right on that.
Yeah, I think Mr. Chair, it's hard to tell. The only change will be, Mr. Chairman, is because we're migrating from the RSM auditors to assurance linkage year. We'll need just to map out how we formulate the audit plan for next year, because ordinarily RSM would now start that work, but of course they are moving away and we've got assurance linkage year coming in. So my hope is we can invite assurance linkage year to the next committee and they can present themselves and then start to begin to scope the audit work that you'd like them to focus on for next year. So that may be the only change we need to do to the work programme.
Yes, that makes sense, and we can probably advise them to do their plans or their agreement different to what the RSM do, and then we can have all the facts together instead of 10 pages apart when we're looking for things. Gloria.
Why have we changed auditors? They've been with us all the time I've been on the council. So why have we changed auditors?
We changed them at the last meeting when, unfortunately, you weren't here.
If you wanted to just look at the last agenda pack, you'll see there's a report on the recommendation then to change auditors from next year. So that hopefully will give you the context as to why that change has been made. But if you want some more information, just let me know. Okay, thank you.
Right, item 11, any other business which I've got? Mark has, come on.
sorry, Mr. Chairman, this relates to the work programme, sorry. I'm very much aware that the contracts for external auditors that are sort of, that we're part of the arrangement, those contracts are up for renewal fairly soon. I think it's 2023. I'm just wondering if at some point a paper will be brought on the possible impact of the external auditors having to re-bid for contracts and things. Thank you.
Were you referring to the external audit or the internal? External is appointed by the PSAA under their agreement, but that's coming in March.
That's actually, Mr. Chairman, it's a council decision. The legislation requires council to make a decision. So we did update the committee last time that we'll bring a paper to March 22's council, which will give the options of opting into the national procurement or opting out and running our own procurement. Yeah.
Is all right? Okay, it's all right, misunderstood me. Right, I'll declare the meeting closed. It wasn't aimed at you, Ashley.